eventually the clerk called his name, and he read the charges, and the judge said, "How do you plead?" He said, "I plead not guilty." The judge says, $25 and hit the envelope. And he said, "Sir, let me explain." He said, bang, $25. He said, he said, "Bailiff, take him away." So the bailiff takes him by the arm and takes him, locks him up.
What?
So there he's locked up in this room, and there's one chair in there and a telephone. So he's got a nickel in his pocket. So he puts the nickel in there, and he calls the boat, and he tells the executive officer, who's a Lieutenant JG.
Yeah.
He says, "They got me locked up down here, and I need you to bring $25 down here and get me out."
What's up, Camden County? Alison Shores, Camden County Chamber of Commerce, and you are catching the 28th episode of the Getting in Your Business podcast. This Getting in Your Business podcast is made possible by our Chairman Circle sponsors, Georgia's Own Credit Union, Comcast Business, Georgia Power Company, Sparklight, Plug Power, St. Mary's DDA, TDS Telecom, and Ameris Bank. Thank you to all of our sponsors. Guys, I just have a treat for you today in the studio. I have James D. Paulk, also known as Jim Paulk, here. He is an author in our community, and I just want to know all the things. He has this book called Shaking Up the World, and I actually read it. And I had the best time going through this book. But before we get into that, I want to know a little bit about you. So first, thank you for joining me.
I'm glad to be here.
So, Mr. Paulk, tell everybody how old you are.
How old am I?
How old are you?
I'll be 91 December 1st.
91. Man, that is crazy. You don't look a day over 70, I promise. So I have a question. So first, tell us a little bit about you, because I don't know if people know anything about you. You went to the Naval Academy. I want to talk all the things. So first, tell us a little bit about you and your story of how you got to the Naval Academy, because it's not how everybody gets in there. So let's talk about that.
Well, I was born in the small town of Brunswick.
Town of Brunswick.
And it was about 10,000 before the Second World War. And we actually lived in Zuda, which was 10 miles north of Brunswick. And it was a very small community, not very many families there. And in fact, we didn't have a car. And my mother had to flag down the train to go to town to get groceries and get another train to come back.
What?
And my dad drove a pulpwood truck.
Okay.
But we had horses, sheep, and goats, and gardens, and everything.
Okay.
And, we moved to town in Brunswick when I was about 4 years old, so I could go to school.
Okay.
And I met had friends that I have today, and we still talk on the phone. And I organized a lot of the reunions over the years, and I sent out a note about once a month to keep people in touch. And that was the thing, was keep in touch. And
pen pals, yeah.
Yeah, and so I kind of grew up hunting and fishing and outdoors, and I was in all kind of mischief. I got a lot of whippings when I was a kid.
So you were a bad kid, okay. Okay, causing some trouble.
And so I tried a little. I was an organizer. My best friend lived in South Carolina. Said, "Jimmy, you've been organizing us since elementary school."
Yeah. And it sounds like you still do that to this day.
I get it's a habit, I guess, or disease. I'll put it that way.
Nah,
disease.
There's nothing wrong with organizing stuff.
Yeah, and so I did a lot of different things when I was a kid. I worked from the time when I was about 8 years old. I had to stand on a wooden box to clean the windshields and sweep out cars, and I'd get a nickel or a dime or like that. So I worked a lot of different jobs growing up. I even drove a gasoline truck and delivered gas to service stations when I was about 17 years old.
Now, did you always know you wanted to go into?
I had a dream that I wanted to go to Annapolis, and that was something I really wanted. And but out of high school, I didn't get in.
You didn't
get an appointment. So I went to North Georgia College in the mountains near Dahlonega, and it was a 24/7 military and a
Okay.
great military school. And I'd never been there before the day I matriculated, but I thought I'd get my appointment after 1 year, but I didn't. It took 2 years. And then
So why didn't you just give up after that?
I don't give up.
Okay.
I always go, 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 go.
This is what you wanted to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just keep going. And so actually I was playing in a golf tournament somewhere in Georgia, and a friend came running out on the course and said, "Jimmy, your mother's trying to get you on the phone. She needs to talk to you. You need to get home immediately." And so I had about 3 holes to play, and I finished my match, and I ran in and called, and she said, "You've got you an appointment to Annapolis." I said, "Wow." So you got to get home, and I had to run down to Mayport and near Jacksonville
Yeah.
to go to physicals. You got to pass all the physical tests that they give you, uh, and then I had to get to Annapolis. So it was like go, 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 and get there.
But then when you get there,
Well, when I got there the first night, we had no responsibilities. We had not been sworn in yet, and
but there was so many of you that started.
there were 1,160 of us
Mhm.
in June of 1953, and we were all running around and where you from and everything. And it seemed like everyone I met uh, was president of their class, valedictorian, captain of the football
I was about to say
team.
captain of the football team. Yep. Everybody had all these and you're like, wait.
And I was none of those things. I'm saying, what am I doing here? I'm just a pretty average person.
No. You have an extraordinary heart and fight in you. And so that's what you were determined to be there. So I love that.
Yeah.
But what's cool is that you were surrounded by all these great men that how you saw them, they were just great men doing all these great things. And you wrote stories. Or they wrote their stories and you compiled them all together because you wanted people to know how great these men were. And what's so funny to me, what I have learned lately is I've been going to different things within our community at Kings Bay here. And I have learned that Navy service members are the most humble people and don't talk about their successes and how great they are. You wouldn't know about them. And I've been around some great people just in our community that did amazing things within the Navy. And I would never know unless I've talked to somebody else that would tell me, or I read this book, or, all these things. And it's just amazing. So some of these stories that are in this book will surprise you. I'll tell you one of my favorite ones was the one that the Auschwitz story, how you had somebody that when he was younger, he was in a concentration camp, got separated from his father, and then got back together after the war. And I just, it was just so cool. I'm fascinated with that, with World War II and those things. So that was one of my favorite stories. But what is one of your, I don't want to give away all the stories in the book because man, there are a ton and very interesting stories. I can't believe that you knew these men, And so tell me a couple of your favorite stories.
I think my favorite stories is a friend, George. Let me make sure I get his name right here. Bu- 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 Oh, George Phillips, and he was a lieutenant,
Yeah.
and he was captain of a seagoing tug, which is really an unusual position for an academy graduate.
Okay.
They would normally go into a destroyer, a cruiser, a quick carrier, or submarine or something, but a tug. And all of his crew were experienced petty officers because that's a very dangerous job.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have a lot of untrained people on the boat. He had two chief warrant officers. One was in charge of the below decks, the engineering, and then Chief Bosun Beans was his topside.
Yeah.
And they got an assignment to go to Philadelphia, and there's a reserve fleet there to pick up a destroyer and tow it around Florida and to Texas. And so they got it hooked up and got it towed out, and they get into the Atlantic and they start heading south. And they get the word that there's a storm that's brewing down in Florida. So he decided that they better not go down there and get hooked up with a destroyer behind them in a big hurricane. So they decided they'd pull into Port Everglades, which is now Fort Lauderdale.
Okay.
So they pulled into there and got tied up. But the night before they got in, George started having abdominal pains.
Okay.
And the hospital corpsman, their doctor, said, "You've got appendicitis." And he said, "We get there, you got to go to the hospital." So he's thinking about the commanding officer's got to go to the hospital. So when they get tied up and everything, the paramedics are up on the dock, and they come down to get him, put him on a gurney, and there goes the captain to the hospital.
Yeah.
So he gets to the hospital, and they determined it was gastroenteritis instead of appendicitis. And he got him treated, and he got back to the boat. So when he gets there, the crew's waiting for him.
Yeah.
Said, "Skipper, we haven't been paid in 2 weeks. We don't have any money at all. We're in the best Liberty port in the country, and we need to get some money. But," and this is the way sailors are, "Sir, we have found out that if you take our pay records down to the Coast Guard station in Miami, that they will pay you. You can come back, give us money. We can all go ashore and have a great time."
Yeah.
So, and we got your pickup truck. This is the way sailors are. They get everything.
They do.
They always get things figured out. So there goes their commanding officer with their pay records going down Highway A1A. And Highway A1A has the ocean on one side, and it's got little strip centers and things on the other side. So as he goes down, suddenly a car pulled out of one of the strip centers, and he dodged him to the left to make sure he wasn't going to T-bone him. And he hit the car on the inside lane. He scraped all down the side. So they pull off the road. And of course, the man in the other car is just madder than the devil, you know.
Yeah.
And he called the police. And so the police come and gave him a ticket and said, "I'm taking your driver's license because you're in the Navy and I can't trust you're going to show up in court. But you show up in court this afternoon at 2:00 and we'll give you your driver's license back."
Okay.
He said, "Okay." So they go to court, and the judge is bilingual because a lot of the cases are in Spanish.
Yeah.
And he's a pretty ornery guy. He wasn't putting up with anything. So eventually the clerk called his name, and he read the charges. And the judge said, "How do you plead?" He said, "I plead not guilty." The judge says, $25, and hit the ammo. And he said, "Sir, let me explain." He said, bang, $25. He said, he said, "Bailiff, take him away." So the bailiff takes him by the arm and takes him, locks him up.
What?
So there he's locked up in this room, and there's one chair in there and a telephone. So he's got a nickel in his pocket. So he puts the nickel in there, and he calls the boat, and he tells the executive officer, who's a Lieutenant JG, he says, "They got me locked up down here, and I need you to bring $25 down here and get me out." He said, "Sir, I don't have $25. He said, "Well, pass a hat. There's got to be $25.
Y'all got to come up with that money." Yeah.
So an hour or so later, they show up, and they get him out of the room, and they're standing in the hall. And he asked Bosun Beans, he says, "Why are you here? You're all dressed in your dress blues and everything like you're ready for inspection." He said, "Well, sir," he says, "I've never had to bail the captain out, and I didn't want to miss this."
Yeah. I love it.
So anyway, they're talking, and about that time, the judge comes out of the courtroom, and he sees this crowd, and he walks over, and all of a sudden, he and Bosun Beans start looking at each other. And all of a sudden, they jumped up and down and ran at each other and grabbed and started dancing around in a circle. And this is the judge and Bosun Beans. And everybody else was wide-eyed. They couldn't believe what was happening. And it turns out that these two guys were best friends in high school in New Jersey. And they joined the Navy and went to Pearl Harbor. And they were in a 40 millimeter mount when a bomb came down and blew both of them over the side. And each thought the other was dead until that moment.
Really?
And then, yeah. So the judge says $5 court costs.
Oh. So we got it down from $25 to $5.
And so then he went back to the boat, and he got on his phone, and he called his wife. He said, "Honey, sit down. I have something to tell you." In the last 2 days, I've been in and out of the hospital and in and out of jail.
But I mean, he had an eventful few days.
Yeah.
Yes. I love it. But I mean, there's stories in this book of all kinds of stuff. You've got a funny little story with Gregory Peck.
Yeah.
Somebody getting candy. But your people knew famous people, such famous people around this time. Even somebody that helped create the GPS system that we use today, the navigation system, all over a failed, something that went wrong, they learned how to do. So I think it's just so cool. Something I've learned, recently, we haven't lost a sub in the United States since 1968. But you even have stories in here about searching for the submarines, the last two that we lost, the Thresher and the Scorpion. And this book is just filled with all kinds of great stories that help give you an understanding of that time period, the whole, because this is about the class of 1957, the Naval Academy Class of 1957. But it just gives you a whole insight to the world of the Navy. And I want to thank you for taking the time to put this together, because it would be such a tragedy if these stories were lost. But something else I have learned, you guys, y'all are just Navy, our United States Navy, especially here in Kings Bay, y'all are just some really badass men. So we are so fortunate. I don't think we know as a community how fortunate we are to have you right here in our backyard and amongst our community. It is amazing. So I want people to know where they can get this book. So I know one place for sure it is for sale, and that is the St. Mary's Sub Museum.
Absolutely.
Yes. Now, Keith Post is somebody that's special to you in your life. Yes, is that correct?
He is probably one of the most impressive people I have ever met in my life.
Agreed.
He is everywhere, doing everything, and doing it spectacularly.
But y'all all have the same passion, and that's what I love. You guys stick together. You all try to do as much as you can after your service with the Navy to keep it alive and keep the camaraderie and the unity together, and to educate people. And I just love that. Like, we just did the World War II memorial on Friday, and wow, what a powerful ceremony. It is remarkable. So people, please go down to the St. Mary's Sub Museum and pick up this book called Shaking Up the World by Jim Paulk. You can get it there. I know there's some other places that you can get it, but you have to check out the Sub Museum. And if you don't know much about the Sub Museum, check out our podcast that we did not too long ago with Keith, the executive director, Keith Post. But yeah, Jim, is there anything else? Where else can they get this book?
You could get it from Amazon. You could get the Kindle versions from Barnes and Noble, and Apple, and you can get the Kindle from Amazon as well. So
yes, and I don't want this day to go by without me saying, like, as much as you wanted to put these stories together for men in your class of 1957, you yourself are a remarkable man, and I don't think you give yourself enough credit. I mean, you worked at Procter & Gamble. Like, what? Like, you've had a remarkable life too, and so I'm so excited for you just to be here, to just give me a chance to talk to you. It's been so much fun. I've learned so much and gotten so many stories, and it's just kind of lit a fire within me about just finding out more. So I want to thank you for that. Is there anything else that you wanted to say on this podcast?
I just, we want this book to be seen everywhere.
Yes.
I think it's an inspiration. I will tell you one story.
Okay.
I got a call from a woman in Jacksonville, and she had ordered a book, and she was going to come up, and she wanted me to sign it on June the 18th in the book signing.
Okay.
So she came up, and I signed the book, and she gave it to her son, and her son left the next week for Annapolis and started. And he is 6'4", and he's left-handed. He was recruited to be a left-handed pitcher for the baseball team.
Oh, really?
Now, when he got to Annapolis, the second day he had an attack of appendicitis, and he had to go to the hospital and have his appendix out.
What is it with this appendicitis stuff? Go ahead.
I don't know. And so anyway, he gets the appendicitis out, and his mother gets a telephone call, and she said it was from a high official at Annapolis.
Okay.
I said, well, who was it? And it said her name was David's. And I said, she's the superintendent of the Naval Academy, the first woman superintendent of the Naval Academy. Well, a few weeks later, the baseball team was told to invite a friend to come to practice. So the other guys invited a coach or teacher or classmate. He invited the superintendent, and she came.
She came?
And a mother went up about a month or so later and for a ball game. And she and the superintendent sat together watching him. And she told him, she said, your son is so well-spoken, so competent, and very charming.
Oh, yeah. Very charming. Here's the thing. I know you're a baseball enthusiast. You like baseball.
Yes.
Yes, you've done a whole lot with baseball. We were talking about it earlier on here. See, these are all the stories that I just want to tell everybody about you. You're amazing. Thank you for being here. And thank you for writing this book for us, compiling all the stories together. I know you have another book that you also have written. But thank you, Mr. Jim, for just blessing my morning and being here. I really appreciate it. Guys, make sure you go down to the St. Mary's Sub Museum, see Keith Post, and he will get you set up with this book. It's amazing. It's really cool. If you want to learn a little bit about some of the men that were, served in our United States Navy, you should definitely check this out. So thank you. Shaking Up the World with Mr. Jim Paulk. I appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys. You've got the 28th episode of the Getting in Your Business podcast.